Thank you. Thank you for your call. I appreciate that. Does anybody?
All right, you guys have a good night.
Thank you.
If I could rebut the mayor's.
Please.
Mr. Mayor, thanks for coming tonight and being among us all here. What would you say your stance is on the semi-automatic tactical rifles as far as a ban on that? Would you agree to something like that, or?
As I had indicated earlier, those weapons currently are legal. You can legally possess them at this point in time. Until they are made illegal, I am supportive of a responsible, law-abiding citizen being able to have one.
And again, Mayor, you mentioned the shooting up in Connecticut. Do you know exactly what type of firearm was used up in Connecticut against those poor children? And again, I'm a father also and a grandfather. My heart goes out to all the victims and the family members up there in Connecticut. Well, again, Mayor, do you know exactly which firearm was used in Connecticut to commit those heinous crimes?
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Lanza had handguns, and they were what had been used in the slaughter, but he also had a semi-automatic weapon, not necessarily used in killing the youngsters, but he had a semi-automatic weapon in his possession.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, do you know where it was recovered, the semi-automatic? When you say semi-automatic weapon, what are you specifically saying, as a semi-automatic handgun or a rifle? Would that be considered?
It's my understanding it was a long gun.
Okay, do you know where it was recovered?
I don't have that level of I'm not knowledgeable about that.
It was recovered in his vehicle in the parking lot. The shooter entered the building using handguns only. He did not use the so-called assault weapon that everybody's been demonizing lately. That wasn't used at all.
But it was in his possession.
Yes, you're right. It was in his possession. He brought it to school outside in the parking lot. He did not use that weapon. He used handguns and fired them to shoot his way into the building and commit these heinous crimes.
Excuse me, may I just make one remark there? I do have another fact, and it was 3.5 rifles. 3.5% of murders that are created in our country are from rifles. That's a very small percentage.
I'm sorry, were you done? One thing I'd like to add, given the concern over tactical rifles, and that is very few people here in Pennsylvania and even throughout the United States realize that it is actually legal to own machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, silencers. And when you look at the statistics, what is extremely surprising is they've never been used in a single crime. You have never had a legally owned machine gun used in any form of crime in the United States. And that's something that bears consideration in the discussion that we're having. Law-abiding citizens are not using these firearms in a nefarious way. Obviously, we have criminals that are going to use firearms and any means that they can find to commit the crimes that they want to commit. It goes back to the old saying, if we only had laws against murder, murder wouldn't happen, right? Unfortunately, we know all too well that that's not the case. Thank you.
When you say that law-abiding citizens, in fact, do own machine guns and short-barreled shotguns, and special licenses are required in order to be in possession of those types of firearms. Am I correct?
It isn't a per se license. It's a tax stamp that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives approves of. But yes, there is an application.
Extensive background checks relative to criminality and mental health are required in order to possess those types of firearms. Am I correct?
Yes, but it is the same background checks that are done under what's called NICS, the National Instant Check System, which the FBI runs. Here in Pennsylvania, we use the PICS system, which is the Pennsylvania Instant Check System. It's more thorough than NICS is, and we query NICS as part of a PICS check. So yes, but the misconception is that it's a more thorough background check when in reality it's not. It is the same background check that is performed for any individual who is purchasing a firearm.
Thank you.
Are those background checks required for the exchange of all firearms?
As far as Class 3, sir? As far as short-barrel shotguns, short-barrel rifles, and machine guns?
Any firearm. Any firearm. Are those background checks required?
There are certain occasions where individuals from the same state do not have to go through a federal firearms licensee. They allow for long gun transfers. Handguns, generally speaking, you must go through a federal firearms licensee, a gun dealer. But there are allowances for rifles and shotguns for people to transfer them to another resident of Pennsylvania, provided they are also a resident of Pennsylvania. The interesting thing is, although people tout that as the gun show loophole, there has never been any finding that any of those firearms have been used in crime. And if anyone has any statistics, I've always been looking for those statistics because they would be the prime example of why the state, and many states have this same allowance, would do away with that permission for residents of the same state to transfer firearms to one another. And again, I just want to caution all our viewers, Pennsylvania's definition of a firearm is somewhat unique. We're talking about long guns and shotguns, not handguns. Generally speaking, always for handguns, you do have to go through a federal firearms licensee.
Thank you.
Okay, in regard to the NICS, the National Instant Criminal Background Check, I know, I do not recall his name, but the shooter at Virginia Tech, I know he was ruled mentally unstable by a judge and was barred from ever owning a firearm, but yet they failed to put him into the system. So the system is failing the United States. I blame some of it on the lawmakers because we're failing them. We're not making sure this information is getting in. I know Pennsylvania, they just put in 643,000 records, mental health records, into the system. So when you say that Pennsylvania is using PICS and not NICS, is that where people are falling through the cracks?
We use PICS, and PICS queries NICS. So in a sense, we have a duplicative layer or background check because in checking PICS, it also goes out and queries NICS. So if NICS says something, we'll get it. If PICS has something, we'll get it as well and deny that individual. And I can tell you, Pennsylvania does a very good job at denying those people who have been involuntarily committed. Here in PA, if you have ever been 302'd, which is basically an involuntary commitment, and that's done just on a doctor's signature. There's no court hearing. You don't have a right to an attorney. There is no due process there. But if you are 302'd based on a doctor's signature, you are forever precluded unless you can get a court to grant you relief from being able to own a firearm, ammunition, and here even in the Commonwealth, an electronic incapacitation device, which is a stun gun or a taser or that. And that comes as a surprise to many people. But here in Pennsylvania, we've added that on when someone becomes prohibited that they cannot have an electronic incapacitation device as well.
We have another home viewer. Please go ahead. We cannot hear you. Can you please be a little bit louder?
Are you there?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I didn't hear you.
Okay.
I just had something about the Mayors Against Illegal Guns. This comes right off their website. If you weren't aware, Michael Bloomberg runs that whole group, and he has left a statement on there saying they would like to limit magazine capacity to 5 or 6 rounds. He left a statement then that if you haven't hit a deer with 3 shots, the deer deserves to get away. This whole thing is not a deer issue, it's not a hunting issue. If we ban high-cap magazines, it only affects you and I. It does nothing to stop a criminal who will buy anything even if they can't have it. I think Mayors Against Illegal Guns is nothing but a front for gun grabbers. And I'll take your answer off the screen.
Would anybody like to address that?
I did see that they were trying to ban high-capacity magazines. The issue with that is the criminals are outgunning the police officers.
I have to disagree with that. I would have to definitely disagree with that. That's a false statement. As a chief of police, we're not outgunned. I can guarantee you that. We're not outgunned. I'm sure the sheriff would agree with that. The police officers are not outgunned by criminals. I run into a lot of cheap handguns. I'm sure Eric, the sheriff, also runs into a lot of cheap handguns. I encounter a lot of knives. I don't encounter men or women or criminals with high-capacity magazines, so-called assault weapons, I'll repeat that, in any way, shape, or form. Again, they're cheap, disposable handguns in the $100 to $150 range. That's what I run into when I'm on my job. When I put my uniform on and risk my life on a daily basis, protect everybody's rights in this room, including yours, Mayor, I come across a lot of cheap handguns, not the so-called assault weapons. And the 15 years that I'm serving, to this day, I still have not encountered anyone with a assault weapon as a threat towards the police department. So I'd have to say that's absolutely false. When the Vice President of the United States comes on and says that the police are outgunned, that's not true. I don't agree with that at all.
Chief Kessler, could you please tell everybody the act that you've taken?
Yes, absolutely. I came up with the, it's called the resolution, the Second Amendment Preservation Resolution for my little borough, which I protect. There's only about 870-some people in the borough. If you want me to read it off, I can read it off. That's quite all right.
Certainly, whatever you'd like to do.
Okay, it states basically, resolution of the Borough of Gilberton, which shall and be known and may be cited as the Second Amendment Preservation Resolution. Whereas the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States reads as follows: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, along with Article 1, Section 21 of the Pennsylvania Constitution, which states right to bear arms. The right of the people, the right of the citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned. Whereas to prevent federal, state, or local infringement on the right to keep and bear firearms, firearms accessories, or ammunition, nullifying all federal, state, or local acts in violation of the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, along with Article 1, Section 21, the right to bear arms of the Pennsylvania Constitution. The people of the Borough of Gilberton do enact as follows. The Council of the Borough of Gilberton within the state of Pennsylvania finds that A, all federal, state, or local acts, laws, orders, rules, or regulations regarding firearms, firearms accessories, or ammunition are a violation of the Second Amendment along with Article 1, Section 21 of the Pennsylvania Constitution and in violation of this resolution. Section B, the Council of this Borough of Gilberton within the state of Pennsylvania recognizes that all federal, state, or local acts, laws, orders, rules, or regulations, past, present, or future, in violation of the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States and or Section 21 of the Constitution of Pennsylvania are not authorized by the Constitution of the United States and or the Constitution of Pennsylvania and violate its true meaning and intent as given by the founders and ratifiers, and are hereby declared to be invalid within Gilberton Borough and all of its boundaries, and shall not be recognized by this council and are specifically rejected by the Borough of Gilberton within all of its boundaries within the state of Pennsylvania and shall be considered null and void and have no effect in the Borough of Gilberton within the state of Pennsylvania. And Section C goes on to say, it shall be the duty of the governing body of Gilberton Borough or the police chief to adopt or enact any and all measures as may be necessary to prevent the unconstitutional enforcement of any federal, state, or local acts, laws, orders, rules, or regulations in violation of the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, along with Article 1, Section 21 of the Pennsylvania Constitution, the right to keep and bear arms. I'd also like to state that I've taken an oath to defend my country, defend my citizens, defend myself, my family, and I intend on abiding that oath. And part of the Constitution is the Second Amendment, and it shall not be infringed, period.